everyone, and welcome to our first Visiting Artist Talk of the 2020-2021 academic year. Each year, the Art and Art History Department and Kohl Gallery collaborate to bring a series of artists to campus to exhibit, to give talks, and to meet with senior studio art majors in one-on-one studio visits. My name's Tara Gladden, and I'm the director and curator for Kohl Gallery. And today I am joined by current Kohl Gallery exhibiting artist, Khristian Weeks.
Hi, everyone.
Khristian is a Baltimore-based artist working primarily with phenomena, sonic, visual, kinetic, and situational to construct environments, scenarios, and experiences as distinct from the making of objects. Using malleable, everyday materials such as plastic drop cloth and mylar sheets in conjunction with phenomena such as air and light, his works often take on animated forms that undulate in space and time. Movement, sound, lighting, materials, and the space itself are used as materials. His background is in music, first as an instrumentalist and improviser, eventually exploring composition and sound installation, and he earned a bachelor's degree from the New England Conservatory of Music. His work is well known in the experimental art scene, and he presents and performs regularly in Boston, New York, Baltimore, DC, Philadelphia, and North Carolina. So just to offer a bit more background, I'll add that Khristian came to Washington College's campus in August for a full week, during which time he worked in Kohl Gallery to create a site-specific work of video art titled The Realist that is currently being exhibited on our website and is also our first online exhibition of this academic year. So if you haven't seen the work, it is freely accessible on the Kohl Gallery website, and I will in just a moment place a link in the chat just in case you need that link. And one other thing, before we launch into the conversation, I'd like to take a moment to thank many people involved with bringing Khristian to campus during the pandemic. It took a lot of people working together to put the proper permissions in place that allowed Khristian to make this work and this talk possible. So Heather Harvey, chair of the Art and Art History Department, Sarah Firehurm, the Vice President of Student Affairs and the Dean of Students, our former Provost, Dean DeQuinzio, Candy Tyrell in Public Safety, Gina Ralston, Carol Landis, and Mike Kavina, who is helping us to run the webinar today, and Vic Costa in Housekeeping, and Larry Stahl in the Theater Department. And finally, I'll give you an idea of the structure of today's event. So Khristian and I are going to talk for about a half hour or so, and then we're going to open up the conversation to questions. Questions can be placed in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function. If using the raise hand function, I will call on you and your mic will be enabled to ask your questions. So that's the idea and the structure for today. And so welcome, Khristian.
Thank you. And thank you, Tara, and thank you, Washington College, and all of the people you mentioned whom I've not gotten to meet. Thank you very much.
So I'd love to begin by talking a bit about your influences and your practice more generally. You have a background in music composition, and now you're working in the field of art, albeit sound art, situational art, installation art. But can you tell us a little bit about your journey from, as an artist, from music to art, your influences, your references, turning points?
Sure, I'll do my best. So yes, I began, well, I mean, I did start drawing. My father was a visual artist. So from a very early age, I was drawing and doing those things. But for various reasons, sort of at the end of high school, I needed to make a decision, or I felt I needed to make a decision between art and music. And I chose music, so in terms of college. And I was a bass player, and I guess I probably still am. But I guess I just got somehow I just was bored, or I realized I was in a role that I didn't really have a lot of wiggle room with, and I think it was in college when I first realized that there was a such thing as a composer, or a person that made, and especially in classical composition, a person that did the whole thing. And I had been, realizing that I was seeing music through the filter or the lens of the instrument I played, which when I realized this, it was a huge revelation. And it was also, I needed to make up for lost time. I felt, that there was just so much out there that I wasn't giving attention to, or was ignorant of, and didn't know anything about. So from then on, I think even now, I've just been, I guess, pursuing, interests that don't come from a specific school of thought or an academic. I didn't, I did go to college for music, but when I was finished with that, and I ended up finally getting my degree, which was in music theory. I quickly realized there was so much more to the making of things, or to my creative life, I guess, without being able to articulate it that way, that I wanted to explore. But I think, I had this sort of blessing and curse of I could do whatever I wanted because I wasn't in school for art. So there was not this thing that was telling me to, pick one thing and do it, that, which is sort of what I grew up on. And I was doing that with music. But once I let go of all that, I was free to do anything I wanted, which is good and liberating. But on the other hand, I did not feel a part of I was not in school with other people making things. I did not have a community of student people or of anyone. So it's sort of that back and forth of I can do whatever I want, but I'm also not anchored in anything, and I don't have so, there's a part of me that believes there is no right or wrong in any of these aesthetic things. And that's good. I like that. But again, I lack the, I guess, that feeling of if I'd gone to art school, perhaps I would have, there's all these things you would learn about. And I'm a self-learner. So I've done self-study of a lot of different things, but I guess that's sort of where I am now, is following, and also in reflection. So I'm following what I want to see, or what I want to experience, or what I want others to experience. But I'm also looking back and seeing what I've done, and where, sort of analyzing, well, what is it that I'm prone to do, or why, looking back at what I've done before. Oh, I see, it's going in that place, and that's where I started to be able to use words like phenomena, and I started to realize, oh, I'm interested in the way this works. And so and also I think this was all kind of combining with real life, so to speak. The sort of becoming conscious as an adult of the distinction between, say, being in school, and that can become your whole world, and it often is for a lot of people, and they finish school and they become a professor at that school, and they spend their whole life in this realm, and I can see that being really interesting. But for me, that was not my situation. So I needed to figure out how to integrate my real life with my creative practice. At least that's what I was coming to realize, and I'm still trying to realize this. So I guess, Tara, in terms of influences, right around 1990, I'm dating myself, but that's about the time where I was kind of taking a break from school, changing, from being an instrumentalist to wanting to compose, or wanting to create something, the whole big picture. I was also working with children. I've always been drawn to, especially little children, and so I managed to find some work in childcare and that sort of thing, babies and very young children. And I think that was really where I started to understand that what I'm interested in is this thing, phenomena, and sensory experience, because that's such a big part of what we provide for young children. Give them, a great sensory experience. And so I guess I'm realizing that over time, that's kind of what I'm trying to do in my creative practice as well. So experience is a very important word. And I think that's why, coming from music, a time-based sort of experience, as opposed to a static, object, and I certainly don't mean to say anything negative or disparaging about any of this, but for me, I'm drawn more to being in a place and something or nothing occurs in a span of time, you know. So I guess ephemeral things come into mind, and I didn't know about any of this. I didn't know about these things as they've already been done a lot, they've been happening for a long time. Artists have been working this way, but I was ignorant of that. And in a way, again, that was a blessing because it just allowed me, I didn't know what had already been done. I was just doing things and experimenting. I think the beginning of that was making video. A friend of mine had a video camera, and this was back when it had a VHS tape in the camera. I mean, that's how it was, at this big clunker. But I was recording. I remember it was out of focus. Something was out of focus, and I remember seeing the trees moving in the shot, and it was out of focus, and it looked. I couldn't believe what it looked like. I mean, it was just undulating kind of. It didn't look anything like what it looked like to my naked eye, as it were. And so I started to make these sort of textural videos that would accompany sound pieces that I was making, or I would do a concert with a friend of sort of chamber music, and these I would lug in these TVs and stuff and put them there with my VCR, and I would play these videos along with the music. They weren't connected, but they were simultaneous. And so I think that's sort of where I started to realize that a sort of not just a visual component, but that something more than just sound, or more than just one media was something that interested me. Because, if you go to a concert, for instance, you're trained, we're conditioned to not pay attention to what it looks like in there, or, we're trained to listen, right? We listen to it, and then we sort of, we don't pay attention to the other stuff. And that seemed kind of strange to me because I was very distracted by the sounds that people were making in their seats while the music was playing, and the way the light was coming in, who knows, whatever it was. And so I just started to realize, and then I think it also went with what I was learning. And I think you asked about John Cage, who, is just a huge, I guess, very huge influence on me, not just in what he made in terms of sound work or whatever, but just his philosophies and the way he talked about art experience. That was very important and still is. And so I guess, go
I
ahead.
see all that in your work. I mean, there's an intuitive freedom to what you do, and a highly sensitive, how shall I put this, perceptual awareness to the way you work with space. And I know in my curatorial statement, I talked a bit about how your work kind of moves it kind of navigates this like liminal space that sort of moves between chaos and control, and it brings to mind ideas that have to do with chance and indeterminacy, and also someone like John Cage, who was a composer, right? So you're coming out of this compositional background like him, but it's like it seems like you're taking some of those compositional ideas that have to do with maybe creating a structure, right? But then allowing a freedom to live within that structure. And I feel all of that in your work. It navigates some in between spaces that are not easy to categorize. And that's what I really like about it: the fact that it is sound, the fact that it is visual, the fact that it is kinetic and situational, and the work seems to take takes on a life of its own. I think that's everything that I love about your work. And it seems to connect with where you're coming from, and everything you're describing to us, like even with the video, when you were talking about the video camera and noticing like some of the idiosyncrasies the perceptual problems, if you will, that were happening with the camera itself and being drawn to those things in a really free and intuitive, intuitive kind of way. I see all those connections.
Yeah, again, this is something that I realized upon reflection or recollection of what I'd been doing. But I guess, and perhaps there's a school of thought for this. But I realized I was much more interested in seeing what happens than I was in being the sort of puppet master, or knowing something from the start to the finish as an author or a composer might. I was much more drawn to being, I guess, like the audience would be, like the viewer would be. I wanted to watch it. I wanted to experience it. And, I've said this to you, I think, before. Part of that is a solitary sort of, if you're alone and you're making work, or you're making something and you're there a long time, it almost becomes like company. You make something that behaves, and then you can sit back and watch it. And I guess that's, and then you can, then I would change. Okay, I like this, I don't like that, that sort of thing. I make choices and I make changes. But the idea of being the observer seems to be something very important to me. And I think for a while, I tried to, that also seemed to me like a kind of way of, I felt like I was maybe being lazy, So I was trying, maybe that was some of the conditioning that I had, with the idea that you have to know, there's certainly ways of looking at things where you have to know everything that's going to, you're the one in control, the artist, right? So and there's work that's that way, and that's fine. But for me, I'm trying to embrace something rather than change myself. I'm trying to say, this is what I like to watch things behave. So I can set up these systems or these environments or whatever it is, and they will not necessarily do my bidding, but they will, they will behave in a certain way, and I'm seeing what you will see or what another person might see. And then gradually it developed more, I guess, into the idea of what I see in everyday phenomena. So I think that's another big thing that I would like to make clear, is that, well, I sort of said it, the idea of what is real life, what is everyday, what is my everyday life. I was spending, because I was working full time, the majority of my days are still spent in the company of little tiny munchkin children, and the people that I work with, whom I love a lot of the time, don't have any idea about the art things that I do or think about. And, not that they wouldn't be interested, but that's just not part of, so it just seems odd to me that I'm spending so much time in this other sort of ordinary or whatever real realm, earning a living, doing these things, and then I have my art practice, and then it dawned on me that it's so, and I guess going back to experimental music and sound, to me, and I'm probably gonna, I don't know, I don't mean any disrespect, but it's just harder to, it seems more sort of exclusive in a way. You have to, a lot of the times the people that are interested in these things are the practitioners themselves. And I'm sure that's true in the visual art realm. And I'm not necessarily trying to change that, but I guess I just want, not to be accessible in some way, but I guess that's the word. I want anyone to be able to see something that I've put in place, and to recognize something that they've seen themselves in it, or that after they see it, they will go back out into the so-called real life, and they'll go, oh, they'll realize that thing that they're seeing, they see it in the kitchen, when the light comes through the window and shines through the soap, and it makes this cool thing on the counter. That's where that comes from. This idea that that it's nature, the nature's doing it already. And I'm just saying, ooh, and then I put it in I guess in art speak, I put it in a frame, or I put it in a certain context where it's kind of taken out of the everyday context and put into the gallery or the space, and then people are invited to experience it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I see all of that in your work. For me, I think about your work as in some ways personally for me, it acts as a metaphor for, you know, the ephemerality of the human experience. I mean, just it reminds me of my own humanity when I see your work, and I see, you know, this your references to everyday life in the work, but but like I don't know, it's like you're reimagining or re-envisioning things from everyday life. So for instance, in the work that you just did in the gallery, how in the video you will have these shots of the gallery that there's nothing in the gallery. And then suddenly the next thing we see in the gallery is, you know, this undulating moving form that to me is, for instance, reminiscent of a waterfall, you know, and it's right there. It's right there in our mind's eye. It just seems it seems like you're hyper aware of your surroundings and allowing, you know, these little moments of everyday life to influence, you know, what happens in your practice. And for me, that also makes me think of other things. It makes me think of your use of materials and how you're working with these everyday kind of inexpensive materials like drop cloth and painter's tape and fans and mylar. It also, you know, it also makes me think of, you know, ideas that have to do with control. You know, how much control do we actually have, you know, over a given situation? It seems like you're always navigating those, not always, but often navigating some of those boundaries in your life. But what I find interesting is how you're using everyday materials in combination with phenomena to do that. Could you talk a little bit more about your use of materials and how you came to use some of the materials that you use, and if the materials hold any particular meaning for you? You know, like, is there any kind of political stance behind the materials, or?
Well, certainly around the political stance, no. At least not intentionally. I think for the, you know, probably the best way to describe they're cheap, and they, you know, a lot of them, they were the materials that I saw doing or behaving in the way that I then appropriate into my own work. So the plastic drop cloth, I mean, I just kind of, I must have seen in a construction site or something, the plastic they cover it up sometimes when they're in the middle of a building and it's blowing in the wind when you're sitting, you know, you're at a stoplight and you see it blowing and doing these things. So I can't remember exactly how I came upon the drop cloth, but, you know, it comes in a huge roll, and it's relatively cheap. And you know, I have to make a little caveat that it's plastic, and you know, we're all becoming plastic, it seems, in
Yeah.
in this realm. So I'm very aware of that sort of aspect of it. But I have, maybe in the defense of this, is that I save this plastic and I reuse it a lot, and you know, it doesn't necessarily get thrown away the way it might in a typical usage when someone's painting a house or whatever, and it gets, you know. So that's just a little caveat. I'm aware of environmental things, and it does it's part of what I think and where I'm thinking, and yeah. But yeah, so the fans, the material, I mean, they do what I need things to do, I guess. I don't have a lot of money, but I also, you mentioned the sort of idiosyncrasies of certain technology. You know, I've always found more of a creative drive coming from something that's not behaving the way it's supposed to, or using something in a way that it wasn't meant to be used. So it's sort of exploiting the idiosyncrasies of something. You know, when I, sorry, there's a giant flying thing going over the apartment. The first computer that I ever had was you know, a desktop e-machine thing that once I realized I could I got music software and all that stuff, and I started piling all these things in there, and it wouldn't work. You know, it would stutter and hiccup, and I realized, ooh, that sounds awesome. You know, and I would record that. You know, and then a little later on, I got enough money somehow to get like a good Mac laptop, and I had no idea what to do. Like it worked perfectly. You know, and plus there's a ton of other people already using a Mac and doing all this awesome stuff. You know, and I didn't know what to, so I need things that are kind of not, you know, or I'm interested more in the things that misbehave, I guess, or I like to find things out about a particular tool that show a different part of it or a different way it operates. Um, yeah. So certainly the ordinariness of things, you know, the idea that it's not high tech or hi-fi or any of that. At least that's where a lot of times I am. I resist, even if I can afford it. I'm probably not going to go and buy the high tech stuff because I'm still interested in working with the other side of it, you know, and seeing what will happen from something that's less sophisticated, you know. And as far as I can tell so far, the nature seems to have its way with anything, you know. I mean, there's incredibly complex and beautiful things that happen, you know, like you said, like the example of the Mylar wind or whatever, you know. I'm still fascinated by those things. And I'm less fascinated, probably because of ignorance. You know, I don't know technology that well. I don't know digital technology that well. Um, so I'm less inclined to climb the curve, the learning curve of it, than I am to just work with sticks and rocks, you know?
Well, something I'd really like to talk more about actually is the role of nature in your work and some of the other ideas we've talked about that have to do with biophilia. I would love to do a quick screen share of the work just to show the audience if they haven't seen like just a little something. So I'll do that quickly.
Okay.
So in terms of nature, there are this particular clip this particular clip I really like a lot. And the other clip I really like is this one, another short clip. And then at other points, we see, you know, overlays of nature integrated with some of the constructions that you create. In this particular case, this is some Mylar that's being used and then overlaid with some nature footage. And so I would love to hear you talk a bit more about nature in your work. And another thing in watching the clips I'd love to hear more about is the use of sound in the work. But maybe
Okay.
nature first.
Okay. Well, I guess first I would want to, I guess, talk about the word nature. There's a lot of there's a lot of different things that people think of when they hear that word and what it means. And I think natural forces might be more accurate for me. Uh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to think. You know, it's a stumper for me. The word nature and what that means, and are we part of nature? All the things about nature are problematic in the sense of, um, yeah. I'm interested in natural forces, and what I mean by that are, like you pointed out, wind, light, and phenomena, and the way that natural forces um, create behavior, movement, sound, all of these things, and often they're all combined together. They're not necessarily untangleable. Um, but I guess the reason why whatever you want to call nature, what I mean by it, and what the reason I'm interested in is again because it's not. I guess it's the distinction between me choreographing something or being the creator person versus something that I see as much, perhaps I'm part of it, but much greater than me, that's doing it all by itself. And I'm I'm very much in awe of that. Uh, and so, in a sense, it's like I would rather give the attention to that, to the natural forces and the power of that, than I would to saying, "Look what I made." I just don't, and who knows why that. I don't know. There's things to talk about there, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. I'm much more interested in seeing what nature will do, and I guess that includes me as well, but more so the wind and the light and these things. And I don't. It's kind of a contradiction because I'm using plastic, in the materials you're referring to, plastic and mylar, which is probably more plastic, and electric fans and electricity. So stuff that you, in a sense, see as contrary to nature, but yet they produce, I think. In other words, nature comes from them too. That this phenomena is not. It happens regardless of what is producing it, and I'm just, like I said, I'm in awe of that.
For me, the two clips that I showed, they really make me think of water. The first clip, well, actually, a lot of the constructions you made for this piece remind me of water. Perceptually, there's something about them. So the first one kind of reminds me of like looking out at like a tide or something, or moving waves, and then the second one makes me think of a waterfall, and like cascading. And I think the sound contributes to that, like that white noise kind of sound of the fans. All of that comes together to create this impression for me that reminds me of nature, and it makes me, and so again, it brings me back to your ideas about perception and how we experience things, and perhaps how we remember things and how we notice things, and the other thing it makes me think about is like reality, and how in your work you've talked about you want to create things that are real, in real time, for real people, to be to experience things physically in space. And so the idea of exploring perception, exploring some of these ideas of nature, right, exploring ideas of reality and what that means right now, especially at this time, this pandemic COVID time, where so much of our realities are happening, like this one right now, in these on-screen environments. Can you talk a little bit about those ideas, and like, making art in the age of COVID, and how it's complicating and challenging your practice and your ideas and your presentation?
Sure. Um, Yes, I did. I guess I did sort of my part of my artistic or creative identity has been I've been nurturing this idea that I want things to happen, in the space where the people come to see it, or experience it. And that even this piece, originally we thought it might be something where one person at a time could come in, and I had a whole plan for what that could be for one person. Um, but that was still in line with what I had been doing, what I have been doing. Um, and then when that became not possible, the next step was, well, I thought that what I would do would be to make a document, like a virtual exhibition, which the ones I've seen is someone going through the gallery with a camera and looking at the work, and I guess I just thought, well, I have an opportunity here to do something perhaps different than that. And I've had a lot of these ideas anyway, and I'm very interested in film, and I'm very interested in things on a screen. I mean, gosh, I watch TV like everyone else, so I do spend a good amount of time looking at a screen. Um, and so I guess I wanted to, it seemed like a good opportunity, as frustrating and as upsetting as it was, to realize that that's the only way I can do this. I did want to embrace it and really and sort of try to anyway look at this. What's different? What really is different? Than what's different between experiencing it in real life and experiencing it on a screen, and what do I have to say about that? What can I sort of show in a piece about that? And I still plan to explore this. Perhaps like everyone, whether we wanted to or not, this time, and by that I mean the coronavirus time, is forcing us all to sort of reconsider perhaps, or see it as an opportunity, or whatever, day by day it changes. But there are these new chances to explore what we do and how it's experienced. And so I guess my intention in this video was really to try and not pin down anything. I wanted it to sort of not I'm very interested in ambiguity, and for a person not to be sure if it's this or that, if something is this or that. And I know that can be frustrating for some viewers, and I'm certainly not meaning to be aggressive, but I enjoy that experience of going somewhere and my expectations are perhaps not met, or it's, there's just different things. I'm surprised by something. So I kind of wanted to try and do that. And I wanted it also to be relatable, though, to a virtual exhibition where you walk in the door of the gallery where you would if it was in real life, and you see what you see. And I knew this was at a college. I knew that there were students here, and that that was part of this. So I figured, if no one else, the students have been in this gallery most likely, and so they know what they're seeing. And then I guess the idea of using the outside, using all of the spaces like the vestibule, that's what you call it, right? The vestibule you're calling that?
Yeah.
Using that space, and then just using the parking lot as though it were you're arriving in your car, or you're arriving to the gallery somehow, and you're there it is, there's the gallery. So I kind of wanted to include some of the experiences that might occur if and when people had gone to the gallery, and then the pictures of the sky and other things, those were all right there. The photos and the videos of the sky were right above the campus. Where I was staying, that was the sky. The sounds I think are interesting because and I don't mean to sound critical. This is just an observation. You remember the sound in the gallery, Tara, right?
Oh yeah, there's a hum in there that never goes away.
So I wasn't aware of that, and I'm very much interested in. I think I'm kind of a reductionist, so I like to think of something from nothing. It starts off as nothing, and then there's things you build onto it, and so I wanted to keep going back to the gallery as being empty and sort of a tabula rasa. Like it's here and it's empty, and then there's this work that gets put in there. But I couldn't, so I guess what I want to say is all of the sound except for a little tiny bit, most of the sound anyway, 99.9% of the sound is just the sound that was happening, that was recorded into the camera that I was using to document it, right? So there's a couple of little sound devices that I use in my work sometimes and that I brought, and that, you know, there's that part where there's the moire pattern thing on the wall. And that during that time where I was setting up that particular work, I had these sound devices in the gallery all around. And I chose not to use much of that. But even with those, you can still hear that drone in the gallery itself. And then outside, you know, outside where I took the photos of the sky, all those sounds are the sounds of the campus. Which again, you know, it's not necessarily political, but you know, I'm learning more and more that there's few places on the earth where you can go and not hear human-made sounds, you know, or at least not for, you can't spend much time before you're hearing something. If not, it's all the time. And so it's pretty loud there. I was kind of surprised. You wouldn't think it from seeing it. It's so beautiful and calm looking, but it's loud. So in a way that was frustrating at first, because you know, for me to avoid that, I would either have to cut out the sound, cut out the audio on the whatever document I'm using, and then place something in put something in its place that I've pre-recorded or somewhere else. I wouldn't have been able to do it at the gallery because that sound is always there, you know. So I decided instead of trying to do that, I would just leave the sounds that are there. And I have to say, there's a couple places where I left the video. I left it a black screen so that you could just hear the sound, and then and there's some beautiful drones and things that occur in there. To me, some beautiful textures that occur, but again, I didn't make them, and I probably wouldn't have used them had they not been there, you know. And the only other times, like you mentioned earlier, when there's actual silence in the video, it's because I turned off the audio, basically, right? I mean, there's no sound anywhere. But that's not real. But it's nice actually to have some silence once in a while in there.
I really enjoyed the silent parts. I thought they were really effective to bring, you know, to bring our attention to bring attention back to the sound. And also, you know, the interaction between silence and the visual, and the interaction between the sound and the visual, and how that changes things. I thought that was really effective. And I also think everything that you're talking about also, you know, deals with site specificity. You know, you were dealing with what was at the site, what was in the sound that was in the site, you know, what the gallery had to offer, what was outside, what was inside, you know, and bringing all of that together into in concert, bringing that into a place where everything worked together. I'd like to open up the conversation to some questions at this point, because it's 3:15 and we've been talking about 45 minutes. So does anybody have any questions that you'd like to ask? And again, you can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Anybody? Chat? Or I'm going back and forth between being able to see the panelists and see. Okay, I have one hand raised here. Sorry, I'm new at this.
We can hit allow to talk.
Yes. Somebody's hand is up. I can't see whose.
Julie Wills.
Hi there. Yeah, hi, Khristian. This is
Hi.
Julie Wills. I'm on a studio art faculty at Washington College. And I'm teaching a semester for first-year students this semester called Experiments in Wonder. And your talk is so beautifully aligned with everything that we're talking about, with phenomenology and observation and all of this. My question for you, and this is maybe in particular motivated for the students in that class who are listening, but I think it's interesting across the board, is that you've been talking about observation, and I love what you said about watching things behave, But I also know that collaboration has played a role in your work. And because my class is talking explicitly right now about interdisciplinary research and what that can look like from an observational standpoint, I wonder if you could talk at all to what it looks like when you're engaging with other people's observations, or what that kind of dialogue or symbiosis has looked like for you.
You mean in terms of collaboration?
Yeah, or just, sort of thinking back and forth between the things that you notice and maybe how you draw upon others' noticings, or what that process might look like for you. I don't mean to stump you there. If it offers up something awesome, then great. If not, don't sweat it.
No, it's not stumping me. I think I understand your question completely. I regret to say that I have not had a lot of, if I am understanding it correctly, I don't know a lot of the time what people think, or what their observations are. I don't know if that has to do with, like I said earlier, I did not go to art school, so I did not participate in the critiquing thing and all that stuff that goes on. And I think that in general, probably in art and a lot of things, there's not a lot of opportunities for that outside of institutions, at least in my experience. A lot of times people are like, that was great, or if they don't say anything, then you kind of know that they didn't think that. And I know you're not asking about whether people like it or not, but what their observations are. I'm sorry to say, I know what Tara's are, because she's been telling me just now.
Khristian, but I think, like, what about when you're collaborating with other artists, like somebody like, what is his name, Peter Redgrave or Peter Redman?
Yes.
And
Peter Redgrave, Peter and I, Peter is a, I hope I'm going to say it correctly, a movement artist. So dance and other forms of movement. And we met several years ago and became fast friends, I'm so grateful to say. And I really think working with Peter was, and is, I hope, in the future, wonderful. He brings a side, many sides, but one is humor, that I think that I've always wanted to work with humor. I mean, I think I have a good sense of humor, and I've enjoyed things that are considered humorous. But my work had always been serious and, that sort of thing. And so I'd always been looking for an in, I think, or I'd been looking for an in, and then I met Peter, and very clearly it just clicked that the things that we're going to do have relations to slapstick and, Charlie Chaplin, and just that kind of, him as a mover. And then my role would be to create sort of environments and sound, through sound and light, and set, I guess you could call it in theater terms. And we are different, so our tastes are somewhat different, and so I think that's an interesting contrast also. So I don't know if that's quite answering or speaking to what you were saying, Julie, but I would like to do more collaborating, and I have collaborated, but I guess, oftentimes collaborating becomes more, one person is a specialist in this thing and another person is a specialist in this thing, and they kind of, almost like in theater where there's the tech, there's like the people that do the sound, the people that do the lighting, the people that do the sets. And so collaboration is much harder. I think we all know this. True collaboration, I think, is dauntingly challenging. Perhaps that speaks to the fact that I do have an ego that, yeah, it's a challenging thing. But I think when it works, it's wonderful. Yeah, I feel
Thanks
like
very much for that, Khristian. I appreciate it.
we have, thanks, Julie. We have some other questions coming in on the chat. So one question is, I'm going to combine two of these. So one was, how did you learn to combine your passions in your pieces, and how did you come about the idea of projecting nature onto the installation?
Combining my passions, I think I'll take that to mean sort of well, the way I would see that, again, is this sort of integration between, if one has a distinction between everyday life and their art life or their art practice, I'm very interested in blurring that distinction. You know, I'm very interested in having representing or sharing everyday the things that I experience are most likely something that other people experience. And I kind of want, I guess that's a way for perhaps that I'm trying to bring people together, or bring myself together with other people, is the idea of saying, you know, check this out, you know, this is, we see this, or yeah, again, I'm not sure if I'm answering the passion question. Passion's an interesting word.
What about bringing nature into the installation?
Right, sure. And I kind of wanted to speak to that too, Tara. The little clip, or the shot that you showed toward the end of the video, that with you can see trees, you can see leaves, and then it's also the inside of the gallery. That shot was, that's more, that's a reflection of my laptop screen, because one of the sort of little tools, or the techniques, the thing that I wanted to use in the video was to have this, you're watching this shot, and then the camera pans and you realize that you were actually not watching what's in real life, you were watching a screen, and then it moves to something else, right? Something like, for instance, in the gallery, you know, and that last shot is, I didn't know that, I mean, I was frustrated, I have to say, by the tree in the reflection. I couldn't not have that there. It wouldn't, you know, it's just the nature of the screen and the sun and all that. And I didn't want it to give away what was going to happen, which was it pans away and then we're actually in nature. And by the way, that's Leakin Park in Baltimore. It's a beautiful, beautiful park. And so I guess in combining that, and same thing with my driving, you know, I was trying to, like the shots of the cornfield or of the trees from the car. That was basically just a way of showing that I drove there. You know, that was my commute, as it were, from Baltimore to Chestertown. And I was just including it in the sort of all of the other images and things. And also because it produced sound that was somehow similar. It all had that kind of drony sort of thing to it. So the sound, and then the blurriness of the images, and I even blurred those together a little bit. So I wasn't using nature in that sense as a like a landscape painting, and I don't think that anyone thought I was. It was more of as a tool, often for a transition or for a showing that, you know, it's not just the work that I made, it's that I'm a living person, and you know, there's other things, and those are powerful too. And I guess that's, it sounds wishy-washy to me, but you know, that's what came out of trying to make this video. You know, it was, again, as I said earlier, oftentimes I look back on what I've done and analyze it and see why am I doing this? You know, I don't set out to do it always in advance. I look back and then I can name it, you know, and then I can say, oh, looks like I'm doing that. And so I guess that's what I'm trying to do now, is I'm looking at the things, and I'm trying to understand why I used them. And that's my best answer right now, is that.
Yeah, and I think that kind of segs into another question. We have a lot of questions coming in. So another question is from Leanne, and she said, I noticed that you embrace a lot of reflective surfaces in many of the individual clips in your work instead of avoiding the reflections. Was this because you wanted to include yourself and or your body in the setting of the work?
Yes, I do use a lot of reflective surfaces and reflection and refraction and these things. No, I am not interested in showing my body or myself, although I couldn't help it a couple of times in the video. And maybe that's something to work on for me in the future. But no, I was kind of interested in not having any actual human presence, direct human presence in the video, more so just the knowledge that humans were present, me making it. But but no, I'm not. My intention was not to have myself, at least not my physical self, in that. My voice is at the end.
Yeah, so can we go to that? I do have a question that came in about the voice at the end, and I'm going to get back to some of the next questions. But this is from Heather Harvey, and Heather is another one of the art professors in the art department. She said, following along the lines of collaboration, can you talk a little bit about the end of the video and how it slips into the human voice? That feels collaborative, even if by chance the voice feels both familiar because it's human, but also elemental in keeping with the natural forces you talked about. It's also a surprise for the viewer and listener. And it's unexpectedly intimate in feel because everything else has been I don't know what this word is, unidentifiable maybe, and nature or machine. Just wondering what your thoughts on choosing to include it. And she asked if it was my voice, and it was not my voice. I think I know whose voice it was, but I'll let you answer that.
Sure. Well, and I thank you for asking that question about collaboration in this regard, because yes, my wonderful and lovely partner, Susanna Kolbeck, who helped me in innumerable ways and helps me in innumerable ways and supports and encourages and all these things. That was her voice. And I will admit that I did write that, or I didn't write it down, but I told her what to say, basically. Or I told her kind of what, so one of the reasons why that's there, she often calls me by my full name like that. If she says my name, she says both my first and last name. And I thought that was a good way of having my name on there, because it's not there in writing. And I thought that was okay. Well, that sort of signs it in a sense, or at least it gives a name to this. And then I think the other thing was more, I don't know, I thought it was clever, but it's just one more layer of this. It's not really like as though like the Saint Elsewhere kind of, I'm dating myself again, but it's the idea that this whole thing was just on a screen, and that, and also, Susanna did not like this that much, but it was very challenging for me, and that was sort of the sentiment of it. She was basically saying, "So, you got any ideas? Like, what are you going to do?" And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. This is impossible.
I think every artist has that moment, at some point in a project.
I would think so. I mean, I don't think that I would express anything that others don't, especially artists or creative people, don't feel I think often we're sort of told not to talk about that part, not to, we're supposed to be confident and all these things. And, I'm sorry, but I'm not always confident, and I don't see any reason not to. I work with little children, and, the idea of knowing yourself, it doesn't necessarily mean then to hide it, right? Or to pretend you're something you're not. And anyway, I wanted it to be, it's so easy when you start thinking of real, what's real mean? And then all kinds of things kind of come up there. So it seemed real to me to add that in, because that's real. It was really what was happening. And once I had the idea of including that as the ending, then I felt much better about the rest of it, because if nothing else, that ending there, it really sort of expresses the whole kind of thing for me. And by the way, real quick, the name The Realist, just if anyone's curious, that comes from working with children, I think, and just that childlike, that idea that that's how kids talk. That's the realist, And so I certainly don't have any, I'm not trying to say it is the realest thing ever, but what I mean is there's that childlike exuberance about, the combination of a sort of fearlessness in the child, or openness to without, and the reason I think is because they're so much in the moment, in the sense that they're not shutting themselves down about what, if it's true or not. They're just like, it's just this engagement with reality, as it were. and I don't know, that I like the word the realist. Remember, Tara, when I told you the title, it sounds like the realist with an I. And I kind of liked that better. If it were a verbal thing, it would be a little funnier. But when you see it in writing, I guess it's still, it still kind of plays with the idea.
I think it plays. I think it plays both ways, and I mean, it makes. I mean, yeah, I think about it. I think about the title in a lot of different ways in relation to the work, and we probably could have had an hour conversation just about that.
Well, I guess I just really want to. I know there might be other questions, but this whole thing has really sort of shaken up or forced my hand in a way, and I think now, the work I was doing and the work I've been doing with phenomena and all of these materials, all these things, has been called into question by something that seems, the idea of reality and the idea of interpersonal things and how we are together and not. Those things are becoming more and more important to me, and things about, about racial justice and social justice and all these things that are happening and have been happening. I mean, I'm constantly looking for a way that that can be part of my work, and I haven't found a way yet. But I guess I'm just saying I'm already in the process of trying to look for finding deeper things that that are deeper in me.
Yeah.
That I want to have part of my art practice, but I don't think I can force that. I can't really all of a sudden become a different kind of an artist. I mean, unless I do, but I haven't yet. But I hope that makes sense. I'm really trying to find ways that seem more to speak to the more of who I am, not just as the thing I make, the stuff that I make, but to have the stuff I make be who I am. Kind of like that, something like that.
Well, let me ask you this. This is another question that came in. This question is from Justin. And he says, you touched on this briefly already, but a large part of this work is simulation, both in simulated motion and video being simulated experience. Is the tension between simulation and reality one you'd want it to explore already, or have your conceptual, have your conceptual foci been radically shift as a result of the pandemic?
I would say yes to both of those, I think. I had already, the idea of, what's the word again? The S word?
Simulation?
Yes, sorry. And I think I spoke to you about this too, Tara, when I was talking about the tape and whether I used the tape or not, the blue tape.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think that anyone would think that what I'm showing them is the real thing, or is, in terms of nature, it's not water, clearly, right? It's just plastic and fans. But I think I'm fascinated by the way, maybe it has to do with the idea of suspending one's disbelief, and that's the thing that came from, being there in real life. It seems easier for me I think it was easier. I'm there and there's this phenomena happening and it's physical and I can kind of feel it in a way, you can feel the air, you're closer to the materials and they're right there present. And on a screen, it's a screen, but then yet there's that weird contradiction. Like I said earlier, most of us spend a lot of time on screens, watching TV, suspending our disbelief all day long, and how powerful that is, watching a film or something that's we believe it like it's real, or we're affected by it emotionally, whatever, like it's a real, and so that I can't deny that power, even though I fancy myself this person that works with real life and that stuff. It makes me question what is real life, and what does our humanness do with all of the stuff that comes at us. Maybe that's all real because it's you know, we're experiencing it one way or another, whether it's on a screen or whether it's not. So I think this piece, yes, and the coronavirus and all of these things have sharpened or made more urgent, perhaps, the idea of the of whether or not something's real. But I don't want to. I like the idea that you can still, it still can almost seem like water to you, even though you know for sure that it's not. It's still because of the behavior of it, perhaps. That's the nature part, you know, that nature shows us things, even if it's a different phenomena altogether. Maybe that's fluid dynamics, but you know, we can, I don't know if that's tricking ourselves or, you know, again, it's suspending our disbelief, but I guess yes, I'm very interested in that tension between those two things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's a good seg into this next question. There's this question and then one last question. This question is from Mackenzie, and Mackenzie says, watching your video, it seems like you're really interested in playing with form, shape, and light and shadows, but want to allow these things to exist in space however they may. That said, and maybe I only get this sense because the exhibit is being presented via video, but our engagement with your work is very intentionally conceived. You created the video, edited the nature scenes in, played with the sound, etc. Can you talk a little bit about the role of intent versus play in the work? Where do you draw the line between them? Intent and play, how do you think about those ideas? Where do you draw the line?
That's a great question. I hope that I can do it some justice, and I'd be happy to talk about this more in another venue. Intent. My intention was to create work in the 1 week of time that I was very generously given to live on the campus and spend the time in the gallery. I had ideas and plans and lots of things written down, but as is often the case, a lot of it did not, either it didn't work the way I had sort of wanted it to, or I ran into things that made other ideas not possible. For instance, silence, not having certain things. So my intention, and again, it's through recollection. It was hard, you know, I mean, I was really nervous, especially after. I mean, the week I was there, I was just in it. You know, I was just trying. I stayed up all night a few times, just working, and trying to, and just to document all this stuff. And I knew I was going to make a video of it, but I did not know exactly what that would look like. And then the process of making the video was laborious and hard because all kinds of things there's a lot of obstacles, not to mention this one. So the play thing, I don't know. The play, I mean, I love play, and as I said, I spend a lot of time with kids, and that's what I want them to think they're doing all day long. But the play, I think, is more about, like, for instance, the form that's floating in the vestibule, and Tara, you probably already, I mean, I've used these forms before in other situations, but that form to me is playing. If I get it set up the right way with the fans in the right place and that sort of thing, and it behaves in a way where it doesn't get caught in something and I don't have to go intervene, then I watch this thing play, you know, and dance, which dance is a weird word for me. I'm not a huge, you know, but that thing is okay for me to dance. I mean, I love to watch it do what it does. So I think that's addressing play. I don't know if that's exactly what Mackenzie meant by her question. I mean, my main, in terms of the work that I set up as phenomena or as examples of phenomena, the play comes from the behavior. Behavior and play, I guess I would use as the same thing. But perhaps you're meaning play more like playful or as distinct from intentional. Yeah, my intention is to set up things so that they play, I guess.
I think that's a good answer. We have one last question. And the question is, does your art involve any travel to distinct or exotic places in order to complete the artwork?
Well, Leakin Park is kind of exotic. No, I guess the short answer is probably no. I wouldn't,
Maybe up here.
Chestertown's exotic to me, I guess. I don't know. I wouldn't turn down, well, I might right now because I'm not getting on an airplane, but I wouldn't turn down the opportunity to travel to some other locale and you know, site specificity. I love working in, you know, in underpasses and in the woods. And, you know, Peter Redgrave and I, speaking of Peter, we did we discovered a bamboo sort of grove outside of this venue where we were performing. And so we incorporated our performance, moved outside into this bamboo grove at like midnight. We discovered while we were in there that there was like birds they must have been nesting or something up in the top of the bamboo. So when you go in there, you hear all this fluttering up in the top of the bamboo. I mean, it was stunning. And we couldn't have planned that in advance. We just discovered it 5 minutes before our performance. And so we used that. So again, I'm not sure I'm answering the question exactly, but I'll go wherever. And I'm often dependent on the environment or the space. And as I get a little older, perhaps I'm developing more courage to wait and not plan out anything until I get there, you know, and then I get to see, instead of planning it all and then realizing that, oh, it won't work in this place, but wait, there's the birds in the bamboo and I didn't figure that into the piece, so I can't use it. So that's, you know, I like the space to dictate what I do with it or in it.
Well, I think again that speaks to Mackenzie's question and that idea of kind of like the balance between intentionality and play and working with sight and shape and the materials and the phenomenon that the palette that you've developed, like in a way, you know, over so many years. So yeah, well, we're getting close to, we're kind of out of time.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here today, for all of your questions. If you have not seen the exhibit on Kohl's website, I did put the link in the chat, so go ahead and copy and paste it into your web browser and go there right now and watch the video in its entirety. I really like the experience with headphones, but I'm generally a headphone person.
By the way, I've never heard it on headphones.
Oh my gosh, you have to hear it on headphones. I want to say thank you so much, Khristian, for being here today, and for the beautiful work that you did in Kohl Gallery. For me, it's really a pleasure to watch. I've watched it several times now.
Huh. Well, thank you.
So with that, I think we will sign off. And we have another artist talk coming up in 2 weeks with Sarah Jameson. The link is also on the Kohl Gallery website, and it's the same time at 2:30. So thank you again, Khristian.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.